Achtung, Achtung, welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk, with me, Al Murray, and James Holland. And we are delighted to have a very, very special guest with us today. James, who has found their way onto the podcast? And I can't quite believe we've managed this. This is wonderful.
We have Tom Lacey, who is a veteran of the 99th Infantry Division, who and the 99th managed to get over to Europe. They landed, I believe, in kind of early November 1944, were immediately transferred to the front line, and before they'd literally dug their first foxhole, the Battle of the Bulge had begun, and Tom was involved in that, and then right through to the end of the war. And Tom, it's wonderful to have you with us. Thank you.
Nice being here.
and I always think it's interesting. You know, we think of the United States as being such a modern place with you know all the mod cons of the world and all the rest of it, and it kind of seems like it's always been the case. But growing up in the 1920s and 1930s, I mean, you know, some tough times in America. I mean, where were you brought up?
I was born in Huntington, Indiana. Then we moved to Indianapolis, and I was there until the third grade. And then my father got a new job in Chicago. We at the very first part of third grade, we moved to Wheaton, Illinois. It's a suburb on the west side of Chicago, about 30 miles to the west. But that's where I had most of my upbringing.
I'm sorry, did you have brothers and sisters and so on?
Yes, I had 2 brothers and 3 sisters. So we were a family of 6 children.
Wow. And what was it like growing up at that time in America? And I mean, was it a good childhood? I mean, were you quite happy? I mean, were times tough? I mean, how did you fare?
Oh, it was a very good childhood. You look at the world today, and it's so different. We never locked our doors, never had to worry about theft, anything. It was really a much different world. You trusted everybody. Everybody tried to help others out. Within the Depression, a lot of it was, and there used to be people that would, hobos and so forth, for scrounging for food. They had ways of marking who was likely to give you a handout and who wasn't, and so forth.
What did your father do, Tom?
He was an editor, a farm editor. He ended up as the information director for the American Farm Bureau Federation,
right,
out of Chicago. So he had a big deal every year getting the convention together. That was a trying time for him. It was 6 weeks getting all that stuff ready. He did a good job of it. They kept him on till he retired.
And what were you expecting to do? Because obviously the war intervenes, and you have to enlist.
Well,
what were you going to do?
I was always interested in aviation from 6 years old, and my dad used to take me out to the field. There was a grass strip in those days. It's a huge airport now, concrete everywhere. But we had a very astute inventor out there. Forget his name right now, but I think he designed the Ford Tri-Motor. That airplane always impressed me. I guess most people that had a big flying to do in those days, they usually had a biplane, you know, a lot of biplanes made. But the airplane that a lot of people had was a Stinson, getting around from one place to another. Relatively inexpensive, but a good airplane.
How old were you when war broke out in December 1941 for, Pearl Harbor?
I was still in high school. I graduated in 1943 and went into the service immediately.
Did you volunteer?
Almost. Sort of. I volunteered for induction.
Right.
What it amounted to. As part of the Army Specialized Training Program.
Right.
The idea was to university and you get an engineering degree. Spent about 3 years working that out, but it didn't quite work that way. We got one real nice semester down at Louisiana State University, which was really a lot of fun. We got in December, this colonel came over from Italy. He said, we're going through first lieutenant or second lieutenants awful fast, and we need a lot of them. So we're going to send you all back home for 10-day furlough and coming back, and you're going to officers training school, OCS, they call it office. Anyhow, we came back and we left the campus, but we ended up with the 99th Infantry Division in Texas as buck privates. And we spent the time there from, I guess it was February or January, February, I can't remember which, when we started. And it was a very good division. We got along well with the older guys there. They lost quite a few people were needed for another division. So they needed people. So they just divided us up among the various companies in the division.
So which company did you join?
Company C, 1st Battalion. A lot of good people in it.
And sorry, which regiment was this? Because obviously you've got 3 regiments. And
393rd was ours. We had the 393rd, 394th, and 395th. We went in, and first place was where we were about the time that the Battle of Bulge hit. It was a very low key position. I didn't expect any kind of, there was no objective anywhere around, and it didn't figure into our plans at all. Didn't figure into anybody's plans but Adolf Hitler's. But we couldn't figure out what they were trying to do. But
Tom, by the time you got out there, I mean, can you remember the crossing and everything? I mean, had you been abroad at all before, or was this the first time you'd ever been overseas?
No, I was the first time I'd been overseas. I was just 18 years old.
I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, you're so young. And I mean, I know it's a little while ago now, but I mean, was there a sense of excitement about going, or nerves, or when you left American shores, did you think this could be the last time I see this place?
It never entered my mind.
That's amazing.
Well, we all just want to get over there, and see the world. So
did you? There was a desire to be a part of it, was there?
The majority of us wanted to get over there. Don't ask me why. But in those days, it was a lot easier to discern between good and evil. It wasn't hard to see the evil in Adolf Hitler, and so we thought we were doing something worthwhile.
As indeed you were.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as a young officer in Company C of the 393rd, I mean, did you feel well trained? I mean, did you feel up to speed, competent?
We were very well trained. Looking back on it, at first, you didn't have a feeling of superior training or anything like that. We always thought we were pretty well trained, but the more you look back on it, the more you realize how exceedingly well trained we were, even down to bayonets. We had a lot of bayonet training, and that did an awful lot to you physically. Yeah. The more bayonet training you had, the stronger you were, and the more you could handle the situation. But I never had to use a bayonet, and very few did. If you needed it, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And what about the relationship with your men? I mean, presumably by kind of training all together in the States and then going over together, you're not a replacement troop. You're not being slotted into something. You've already built up a kind of a camaraderie, I suppose.
Right. I was so happy to be a part of a division. We used to have, later on in the war, we lost a lot of people, so we had to have a lot of replacements. And the replacement never had the feeling that we had of, they're nice guys and so forth. They just were not trained as well. And when you're a part of an outfit, you grow. A lot of that growth is psychological as well as physical. And you know what your buddy's going to do The new guys, you don't know what they're going to do. They didn't feel camaraderie the way we did. So I was always happy that I was with an outfit like the 99th, and it stuck together the way it did. I mean, we were cut up pretty badly at the Bulge.
Yes, I was going to ask Tom, do you think that made a real difference at the Bulge, that you were a coherent unit? Is that one of the reasons you were able to get through and to endure that attack, that event? Because you were a division like that.
Yeah, I think that had a lot to do with it. We had a general from the First World War, General Lauer. And he was a pretty much old Army way of doing things. And he was not the most popular guy in the world. But I tell you, he knew what he was doing. He really did. And we held the north corner, which prevented that attack from being successful. They had to make a bridge and get across a place called Three Bridges, I think. We were able to hold them back. We actually prevented their tanks from advancing. They got a few of them through, but they didn't ever get the mass attack like they were expecting to do. And they just had to do that in 2 days. They never even came close. The very first night after we retreated to the Elsenborn Ridge, where I spent the next 6 weeks in the foxhole, that very first night, we were called up about 7 o'clock at night. And it's dark at that time because it was winter time, quite a ways north. But all of a sudden, about 7 o'clock, all hell broke loose. And we saw the greatest 4th of July celebration I ever saw. I mean, shells going back and forth. But that stopped them. And then they made 2 more attacks the next day, and then that was the end. They never did make a full-blown
Because
attack.
where you were alongside the 394th, weren't you? And you absolutely, I mean, they just went bam straight into you and didn't really get anywhere at all. I mean,
No.
it's amazing. And you think
They
that's
did.
your first action is incredible.
Well, we'd had patrols, did patrols every day or every night, usually at night. And so we had a little bit of action, kind of warming up, if you say. But nobody ever expected that. Even Eisenhower, he couldn't see any objectives. So he had trouble believing that it was full-blown. Finally, very obvious. And then
So
he
when you were in your positions, when you first moved into the line in November 44, and then obviously, in the first couple of weeks of December 1944, did you in your line, you had no inkling at all about what was to come?
Oh, no. None.
You didn't hear a thing?
No, we had patrol. We knew where they were, and they knew where we were. And we go back and forth, But it was very mild compared to artillery barrage, which lasted about 25 minutes. Most thorough thing they threw everything, every possible thing they could shoot. It just blew up and over the woods and created a big noise, but it was very ineffective. They have to hit buildings, to do anything.
So that barrage didn't cause a huge number of casualties amongst your men then?
Well, it knocked out every sound-powered phone we had in the whole damn regiment. The only thing left was my radio. So it made it pretty important for a while. It was the only communication we had. We had not counted on anything like that, so we didn't even have a spare battery. I think it was going back to the Elsenborn Ridge. The battery finally left. But at least it had done its job to get us back to the 2nd Division. They were shelling us because they didn't know we were there. It was at night. We'd been lost for 2 days, cut off. But we worked well with the 2nd Division.
One thing I'd like to ask you, though, is I know you said you'd done a few patrols beforehand. Until you're really in the thick of the action, it doesn't matter how much training you've had. You don't know how you're going to cope with what's flung at you. And
Yes,
when that barrage came down, how did you cope with that? Did you kind of take that quite well? I mean, did you manage to remain quite calm?
I did, and most of the guys did, really. We were pretty well cut up, and all of the platoons and squads were coming back from up front, and we dug in around the command posts, company command posts. Let's say we maybe had a third of the people left at that time. It might have been a little bit less than that, but we were trading shots with the guys that thought they were going to take us over. And about halfway through this battle, this one guy from Kentucky, he yells out, "Sergeant Baker!" Sergeant Baker was our first sergeant. And he said, "Sergeant Baker, I'm going to tell you," he said, "it's more damn fun," he said, "than shooting squirrels back in Harlan County." And that just changed the whole picture right away. He got a battlefield commission for that, by the way.
Did he?
He did.
Incredible.
That's absolutely amazing. That's absolutely amazing. Well, I think the 99th inflicted considerably more casualties on the enemy than the enemy did on you. Isn't that correct, I think?
Well, maybe. I guess in the long run, maybe we did. But they cut us up awful badly because we were way out there. Our company was the only company, I think, that was in German territory. We were just barely over the international highway, just 100 yards maybe, but we'd been cut off completely, and it's been amazing. We were supposed to form at 9 o'clock on morning after the big barrage, and we got back to the battalion where we were supposed to form, and suddenly a machine gun operator let go on the right, and I saw people surrendering, but I didn't think that was a good idea. So I went to the left, and fortunately there was a forest, about 7 feet high, trees close together. Perfect. We just went through that thing. Nobody could see us. And it was a long forest. It must have been at least half mile, if not 3/4 of a mile thick. So we took off to the west and then reformed and had guys from everywhere. Everybody had been cut up badly. Our company particularly.
Well, Tom, all the accounts I've read of the battle dwell on how cold it was and the weather.
It didn't start out that cold. It started out about 30 to maybe 38 degrees day and night. And the biggest problem then was trench foot. So it was not that cold. It was chilly, but not cold. But then when we got back to the Elsenborn Ridge, which was perfect field of fire, that was a smart thing to do, to form on that Elsenborn Ridge.
To move back to the ridge?
Yes. Mm-hmm. But it was about the 1st of January, I think, very close to it, that it really started getting cold. We had to get rebooted and everything. I mean, I think it was the coldest winter they'd had in about 100 years, something like that. And they always had bad weather during the winter, but nobody, even the people there, they said they hadn't seen it that cold. It was really, really cold. Yeah.
And what were you kitted out with? I mean, did you have enough winter kit?
We had good supplies throughout the entire time, and we were able to stay warm, but it was not easy. And cold was really our biggest problem. There were times we really didn't care too much, And the strange thing is, when you get real cold like that for a long period of time, you slow down. Your speech slows down. Your thinking. You have to, every time you talk to somebody, I would say, huh? The first thing was on, huh? And you have to repeat. And sometimes you have to repeat a third time. And you were in the same way, maybe not as bad in some. That was a miserable way of communicating when you had to repeat things time and time again.
I mean,
Yeah.
to live in a hole in the ground in winter, with the snow around in minus degrees, with the enemy shelling you. I mean, that's a baptism of fire and ice, isn't it? I mean, that's absolutely extraordinary. But you managed to keep going. I mean, personally, you sort of managed to keep your wits about you.
I like to write, and I'd spend the time writing letters. People, my folks, of course, and a girlfriend, and lots of other people. That's the way I exercise my time. Because there wasn't much to do. You had to sit there and you had to be there. And they tried their darndest to knock us out. But once we got dug in on that ridge, there was no way they could ever get you.
Was that was the feeling, was it? That there's no way they're going to get us out of here. We're not going anywhere. Was that not just your feeling, but the general feeling?
I think so. Not everybody said it, but we knew we had an awfully good situation. And as long as we had supply, that was the big thing. And
you had supplies of ammunition, food, coffee, cigarettes.
We never ran out. During the time we were gone, we're out of communication for 2 days. In fact, our own general, in his book after the war, he said he didn't know where we were. Literally the lost battalion.
You personally, were you in your own foxhole or were you sharing it with someone?
Well, I was originally sharing it with our first sergeant, Sergeant Baker. He and I got to have a good relationship, but it didn't start out that way. It ended up that way. Anyhow, it's a long story. We almost got separated from the division because we were asked to guard some, of all things, sleeping bags. Officer's sleeping bag by our first sergeant, and he forgot about us. So this friend of mine, the other guy that was supposed to guard these things, we might as well use them. So we just got in, and we heard these tanks going all night long because we were at a turn, and we hoped there were American tanks rather than German, but we really didn't care too much. But there's no way they could have been German because we didn't have any interruption. It was just everybody coming back and digging in on the Helsingborg Ridge. But we woke up in the morning, the sun was shining. We took off in the direction that everybody had been going. We saw a big old 90 millimeter on a half track, and they were having breakfast. So they said, "You like breakfast?" We said, "Sure would." So they invited us, and as we were talking, they lost 2 gunners. He said, "Have you ever fired a big gun?" I said, "No." "Would you like a job?" And I said, "Well, 99th Division, have you heard of them or seen them?" "No." I said, "Well, we better go try to find our outfit." And they said, "If not, we'll come back." We were just about ready to turn around and come back when I hear, "Lacey, where have you been?" It was Sergeant Baker. And I said, "We were watching those sleeping bags." I guess he said, "Oh my gosh." I said, "Yeah, well, start digging, And that's where we had the first foxhole. Well, after I got through this shale, there was about 6 inches of shale you had to get through. It came to be fairly easy digging, but that first 6 or 7 inches was tough as hell. And anyhow, it had this wonderful stock, so I mean, it was perfect. And Sergeant Baker, we sat down for the night. Well, he had this habit of whistling through his teeth when he was asleep, and it went on all night long. It drove me up a wall. I couldn't take it. And I said, Sergeant, I don't mean anything, but your whistling through your teeth just kills me. He said, could I go dig my own foxhole? No. He took it pretty nice. But he said, if you want to go ahead. So I did. It was fairly close, but it was far enough away I didn't have to hear that whistling through the teeth. Oh, my golly.
So you were on that Elsenborn Ridge for some 6 weeks or so, and then finally, I think, what was it, about sort of beginning of February that you kind of went on the offensive again?
We went on the offensive, I think, about the 31st of January. So we had about 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then we really didn't stop from then on. Went across the Cologne Plain at a pretty good rate. It's mostly riding tanks.
Oh, really?
We were
jumping on the back of Shermans and things.
Right. Shermans and the M18 had a 90 millimeter, very nice weapon. And we could see the two towers of the Cologne church, a huge church. These huge towers. And we were just about ready. Well, in fact, we'd already started to dig in, and they said, get on the trucks. They just found a bridge. And we spent the night above and about a mile from the famous, what's the name of that bridge? Remagen Bridge. But we were the first to go over the bridge, the first division to get across. Yeah.
How did it feel to be in Germany, to be actually taking it to the Germans, as it were? Did it feel like you were an army victorious? How did the Germans react to you? Any that you encountered, the civilians rather than the soldiers, obviously.
Well, we didn't have much contact with civilians. When we were in, there was usually fighting going on, so they were in their dugout. You know, each town had a place where they could all get in safely. And it would be in their hole, and we go through, and then they go back to their farming. But they had a farm, you know. They just kept. I did have one real nice experience in the Cologne Plain. It was in the morning, and I hadn't had a hot cup of coffee for I don't know how long. We were interrupted for a while, like you used to do, hurry up and wait. And I see this smoke coming out of this chimney in a little farming community, about 4 families, I think it was. It's called Big Quadrangle. So I went in and knocked on the door. Now, this is 8 o'clock in the morning, and this lady opens the door, and she saw my carbine. She thought I was an officer because I had a carbine carrying the radio. They let you take a carbine rather than M1. That's half the weight. She said, would you like breakfast? This family, 4 generations, were having breakfast. And I thought, I'd just like to warm up my sea rations. We could give you breakfast, eggs and bacon. I had a whole breakfast, and they had my sea rations. I had never had sea rations before. Yeah. So anyhow, she spoke perfect English, been educated, I think, someplace in Pennsylvania. She knew everything about what was going on in the United States. And she had a sister or a relation somewhere in Philadelphia, I think. So that was a wonderful experience. Fortunately, outfit was still there when I got back.
But did you have any particular close shaves yourself?
I had a lot of them.
I
very,
figured you might.
very overworked guardian angel, I'll tell you. No, I had a lot of them.
And do you think, is that just down to good luck, or is that partly down to generating a kind of sixth sense, a nose for danger, and your training? I mean, how much do those factors play a part?
I think a little bit of both, really. There's a certain smartness, I guess, you get after a few encounters. It doesn't seem to take too long. I saw one case where 3 guys came in and 3 guys went out, the same 3 on the very same day. Some of that was just lack of training, They shouldn't have been that close together, for one thing. They all got wiped out with one shell. But an awful lot of it is good luck. Sooner or later, you're going to get hit, I think, And fortunately, in my case, it was later. They were giving at, it was even during the Battle of the Bulge, I think, cases where we would go to Brussels for 3 or 4 days, or London, or one thing and another, Paris even. My good buddy carried the radio with me. He got one to Paris for a week. So it was to keep morale going, And these were few and far between, of course, but they did come. And after a while, I said, Sergeant Baker, I says, when am I going to get my trip, Oh, he says, you're too bad, but we can't let you go. Anyhow, we had just taken this town. We were just, about 10 miles from the Autobahn, I think, because they took the Autobahn the very next day. But we'd taken over this little town, and we were sitting around, about 12 of us, drinking the wine. They all had a wine closet someplace. Sergeant Baker comes in. He says, Lacey, he says, get your gear and report outside. You're going home. Yeah, I said, and something, Roosevelt going to take me there, huh? And he said, get that, or I'll give this thing to somebody else. Had just instituted 30 days, it was 30 days home. And I said, holy mackerel, he was serious. But it's how it happened. But it's what they had 2 for the whole regiment, one from our company, and I was only one of 12 started who had landed in Le Havre, 12 out of about 200. So they thought, let's put those 12 names in a hat and draw. And that's what happened. That's how I got. So I got out of the boat, about a month before the end of the war.
How amazing. So you got away with it. You were unscathed.
Unscathed. I didn't get a bump.
Wow. I mean, statistically, the chances of that are 0, basically.
Yeah, just about. Yeah, pretty close.
And, when you look back upon that time, so that was, November through to, say, was it April or something when you went out, or end of March?
The 5th of April, or maybe the 8th of April, something like that.
So that's kind of, best 6 months in the front line, really, I guess.
Roughly. Yeah, I can't remember the number of days.
And then you go back to America, and the war's over, and you get on with the rest of your life.
Oh, yeah. Got out on the 2nd of February, 45, and I started, fortunately, I had some pull at Purdue University, but I started class, I think, the 6th of March. Just a little over, a couple days over a month, and that was very unusual. Very, very unusual. It happened because my dad had an awful good friend who was big at Purdue University.
Well, we all need friends in high places. As you were then sort of getting back to kind of civilian life and the post-war years, I mean, did you ever think back upon your time with the 99th? And time in the war?
But I didn't spend an unusual amount of time. I was doing what I wanted to do, studying aircraft. I was in the Purdue Glider Club and got to fly and enjoyed life. But I enjoyed my whole time at Purdue.
Would you have missed it for the world being a soldier, or would you rather? Is it a part of your life that you're glad you experienced, or something that if you'd not had to, that would have been just fine? If you see what I mean.
Yeah. I had no desire to be a military man. I wouldn't have traded that for anything.
We were just talking a minute ago, and World War II is completely unique. There was nothing like it, and nothing like it will ever happen again. And
I hope so.
Well, yes, of
not
course.
in a way that that millions of men are fighting each other. I mean, that's just not going to happen. And it must be. I mean, here we are, 70 odd years on from since the Battle of the Bulge, and since the end, 75 years since the end of the war. I mean, how do you look back on it now? I mean, do you still feel it was? Clearly, it was something that what you did was it was a crusade. It was something that was of vital importance. I mean, are you proud of your part in it?
We knew you had to do it. There was no other way that we could have done that without a war. We were completely unprepared. I'll tell you one thing about Roosevelt. He saw it coming, and he did a lot. When I was doing some special research one time for McDonnell Douglas, where I worked, and I saw a bit of information that I couldn't believe. But I checked it out 6 different times. December 7th, 1941. Who led the world in aircraft production? The United States of America. We were making more airplanes at that time, and we just started. I had just got to that point, I think. I was surprised at their production rate. They kept building those fighters until very late in the war.
I mean, the story of how America gets to that point in December 1941 is truly extraordinary. That 18 months from the middle of 1940, where Roosevelt gets Congress to kind of agree the vast increase in funding for war production, and then wins that election in November 1940. It's the most amazing episode, and you're right. It happens so quickly. It's just astonishing.
It really, really did. When you can get a whole country united.
Well, a whole series of countries united. I mean, it's all those allies, those Western allies, all pulling together. Is what really does it. It's just amazing, and it's a shame we can't be like that now. Well, hats off to you for what you did and what you went through, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's been fascinating. I shall never look at the Elsborne Ridge the same now.
Yes. Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you for your time.